Hi everyone, this is Stephen. Today I wanted to do another video. It's a bit of a follow-up from the video I did a couple of weeks ago looking at 6,000 year timelines based on a creation date through to the end of the age. And this is based around the idea that God has a 7,000 year plan for mankind, that the first 6,000 years represent the first 6 days of the week, with the seventh day representing the Sabbath, Saturday, as we know it today, and that last day, that last 1,000 years representing the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. And one of the primary focuses of my last email was looking across those timelines and trying to sort of work out when the second coming of Christ might be, and potentially a rapture date. I believe in a 7-year pre-tribulation rapture, and so these timelines are sort of based around trying to identify when that might be. My conclusion today is I'm still not 100% sure, but I did discover something in the last week or so that gives some weight, I think, to the timelines that I have here, and I sort of want to work through that, and any feedback is welcome. So last time I looked at two major 6,000 year timelines, one starting on the 4th of August 3915 BC, and that was based on a sign in the constellations, which is reflected in Revelation 12 verses 1 to 2, and I've covered that in my last video, but I believe what we saw in this, or what was seen in the stars on that 4th of August 3915 BC was probably the creation, the start of the creation. And then that ended on the 20th of May 2000. So, and the other thing I just wanted to mention is that the timelines I've been working on are based on a 360-day year, not a Gregorian 365-day year, solar year, or a lunar year, or a Enoch year, or any other year, just a 360-day prophetic year. And that's because primarily when it comes to prophecy in the Bible, God uses a 360-day year. So that was the first timeline. The second timeline I was able to determine using the birth date of Abraham, which was the 21st of February 1953. That's down here. And that again was another, was able to be verified through Stellarium, which I use looking at all the planets and constellations and stars. And that birth date was described in a book called the Book of Jasher, chapter 8, and it was a conjunction really of five planets that occurred, and that actually happened on the 21st of February 1953. Working back using Bible genealogies, 1948 years as laid out in Genesis, I was able to determine this date, which I believe is the start of the Adamic 6,000 year timeline, on the 21st of February 3873 BC. Where it got interesting was there was this time period between the two, and I'd spent a lot of time looking at that, and it became interesting because it was exactly 15,176 days. Now that works out to be 42 years and an extra 56 days if we're looking at a prophetic year of 360 days. So what I have here is there was a 56-day period which led to the 29th of September 3915 BC. Now that was Tishri 1, which is the 9th month of the Hebrew year, which is commonly known as the Feast of Trumpets. And then it was exactly 42 years, or 15,120 days, till the start of this other timeline. So this number 42 keeps appearing, and what I wanted to focus on today was that number 42. The years that I've spent studying the Bible, it's become pretty clear to me that God uses numbers in a very specific way. They all have meaning, and the fun part is trying to work out what they all mean and how they all link together. And hopefully today I can share some of what I think is quite remarkable. So first up, though, I wanted to talk about this 56 days that keeps reappearing in my studies. And so 56 days is 8 weeks of 7 days. But something came out the other day. So I was looking at this timeline again, going, well, there's 56 days between this Revelation 12 sign on the 4th of August, and then exactly 56 days later we had the Feast of Trumpets on Tishri 1, and then exactly 42 years for this other timeline to start. When I started these studies, it didn't work out that way. It was a lot of to and fro and a lot of calculations. This is a very brief summary of hundreds of hours of work. But the number 56 is quite interesting, and I wanted to go through that before I get into the 42, because I had a theory which I wanted to share. And I'm going to do the numbers on the spreadsheet as we go. But one of the things that popped up in my studies was this mention of about a half an hour of time in Revelation. And it was, let me just find the scripture here. Here we go. So Revelation 8 verses 1, and this is the seventh seal being opened in the prelude to the seven trumpets. And it says, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Now, the Bible's very specific, so the fact that it had the word about in there sort of got me thinking, why wasn't it a half hour? Why was it about half an hour? And then I was thinking about the 7-year tribulation period. So the first thing I'll look at is 7 years prophetically is, times that by 360 days, is 2,520 days. And there's mentions throughout Revelation and Daniel about the time times time and a half and 42 months and 3.5 years. So that all equals the same. So if you have 1,260 days, that is equivalent to 42 months, which is also equivalent to 3.5 years. All the same. So I was looking at this 56 that kept coming up, and for fun I decided to calculate what 56 was as a percentage going into 7 years. So you put that in, and I got this 0.22222, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what does that mean? And then I looked at it from a I've had this theory around there's 360 days in the prophetic calendar, and that links to a circle which has, so we have a circle which has 360 degrees, and of course 90 degrees would represent east, 180 degrees would be south, 270 degrees would be west, and 0 or 360 degrees would be north. So let's just put this in here. So that's north. 0 degrees is also 360. You then get to 90 degrees, which is east. 180 degrees, which is south. And 270 degrees, which is west. Now, if I can spell. Right. So the other thing that I've looked at is a circle in conjunction with time. So 360 degrees would be a 12-hour period. So if you look at it this way, 360 degrees, if you're looking at 12 hours, would be 12 hours, and then 720 degrees, so you go around a circle twice, you get to 24 hours in a day. So if we look at this in terms of minutes, so here's your 60 minutes per hour, you get 720 minutes, and in a 24-hour period, that doubles to 1440 minutes. I always thought that number was quite interesting because the Bible in Revelation talks about the 144,000 twice. And, that's 12 times 12, and people have got a lot of theories around what that represents. I've got some more stuff I probably will do another video on in terms of the tabernacle and some of the dimensions of the tabernacle. But in the case of this 56, I thought, okay, well, what is that in a circle? So it works out that 0.0222 of 360 degrees equals 8. So 8 degrees is 0.0222, or 2.222% of 360 degrees. Now, using that same calculation, if we take 0.022222, and it's recurring, times that by 1440 minutes in a day, we get 32 minutes. It rounds up if we keep going. It rounds up to 32 minutes. So this got me interested in the fact that it says in Revelation 8:1 that he opened the seal and there was silence for about half an hour. Well, just using that number, that 56, it works out at 32 minutes. So I have a suspicion, could be completely wrong, but does 56 days actually represent the half an hour, or about half an hour described in heaven? 56 days would be 7 times 8 days, that's 8 weeks. So linking that back to the timeline, was there about a half an hour of silence in heaven between the Revelation 12 sign and the Feast of Trumpets on the 29th? So that's just a bit of a theory, just wanted to cover that off. So moving on, the other thing about the number 56, which is quite interesting, is here's another number that keeps up coming up in the Bible studies, is 280. Well, 280 is actually 56 times 5. It's also 40 weeks, which is the gestation period of a woman, and it's 40 being the number of trial or probation. Throughout the Bible, you see 40 mentioned dozens of times. It also happens to be 280 days between when Israel was attacked on the 7th of October 2023, on the last great day, the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, and the 13th of July. And I'll go through the timeline again, and I'll show you why that 13th of July was interesting, and the fact that it was exactly 280 days after Israel was attacked. So with the 6,000 year timeline, I'm not going to go through all the details in between, but if we go right down to the very end, we have the first timeline ending on the 20th of May, and the second timeline, the Adamic one, ends on the way down here on the here we go, 7th of December 2041. But if you come back 56 days like we had at the beginning, then you get to the 12th of October 2041. Now, what I had in here was, because there's a 42-year period at the beginning, there's also a 42-year period at the end. So I want to break this down. So 42 years equals 15,120 days. Well, this is also, you can break it down into 12 times 3.5 years is 42 years, and 6 times 7 years is also 42 years. So in other words, 12 times 1,260 days is 15,120 days. So what I did is I started breaking those periods of 1,260 days between the 20th of May 2000 through to the 7th of October 2041. And these are the periods here. So the first one ended on the 1st of November 2003, the second one on the 14th of April 2007, and so forth. And so now we get to about now. So today is the 22nd of May. Here's the 13th of July 2024, and this is the 7th period. God, one of God's favourite numbers is 7. So I don't think it's any mistake that that 7th period ends on the 13th of July. And as I said earlier, between the 7th of October 2023, when Israel was attacked, it's 280 days to the 13th of July there. Now, so back to 42. So we know the 7th period of 1260 days ends on the 13th of July 2024. Now, the 8th period of 1260 days ends on the 25th of December, Christmas Day in 2027. So the Bible talks, Revelation talks about the 42 months, the 3.5 years, or time times a time and a half, which represents 3.5 years. Now this happens to be, if you're counting from day 0 through to day 15,120, this day is day 8820 out of 15,120. And if we did that as a percentage, we would have 0.58333. Now, the next one, the 8th period, which ends on the 25th of December, is day 0080 out of 15,120. And that equals 0.66666. Interesting number, 0.666. We'll come back to that. And then the 9th period of 1260 days. So this would be, these two periods combined would be the 7 years, or the 2,520 days of the tribulation. That ends on the 7th of June 2031. And that is day 11340. And that's another interesting number, because when you divide that by 15,120 days, you get 0.75. Another really interesting number, and I'll come back to that one. So you've got these 3 periods, and then there's another 3 periods after this, leading through to 2041, and I have some theories on that. I covered that in my last video. I potentially think that the temple described in Ezekiel 40 to 48 will be built, and there's some other interesting cosmological events that occur in 2040 on the Feast of Trumpets, another major conjunction of planets on the 8th of September 2040. So here's the 3 periods. Now, the theory is here that the tribulation period would start on the 13th of July. That would be the end of the 7th period. Now, the midpoint of the tribulation, according to Revelation, is when the beast, or the Antichrist, desecrates the temple in Jerusalem, and there is a lot of conversation and theory that a new temple will be built in Jerusalem at some point in the next period of time. Who knows exactly when, but certainly before, according to my calculations, before the midpoint of the tribulation in 2027. Some of you may be aware of the heifers that are potentially going to be sacrificed for this temple, and there's a whole lot of information around that all over the internet. So the midpoint of the tribulation is called the abomination of desolation. It's described a few times in the Bible. And so this is when Satan, the Antichrist, declares himself God, and it then states that he will reign for 42 months. And it's really interesting that the word 42 is used. It's not any other number. It's specifically 42. So I think it's not a coincidence that what these timelines, these two 6,000-year timelines that I've discovered, happen to have a 42-year gap between them, and that the period that the Antichrist reigns is for 42 months. Now, the next really interesting thing that I found just last week was again around 42, but in this case it was around 420. So if you take a 3.5-year period, or 1260 days, and you divide that by 3, you get 420 days. Now that happens to be 14 months, or 60 weeks, or 10,080 hours. Now that's interesting because 10,080 is also the day that the midpoint of the tribulation could fall, theoretically. So I thought that was quite interesting. But then I did some date crunching and had a look at, well, if there's 3 periods of 420 days, when do they actually fall? So I'll go across to my working sheet, which is a bit of a convoluted mess, but we'll have a look and I'll try and show you what's in here. Okay, so if I go back a little bit, there's a lot in here, so I won't try and explain everything, but the key column here is this column here, column L, is my dates going all the way back to the year 2000. And it has the day numbers from the 20th of May 2000 through to the 7th of October 2041. So Israel was attacked back here on the 7th of October 2023. That was day 8540. I've also got the day count here from when Israel became a nation on the 14th of May 1948. So you'll see here that they turned 27,540 days old on that day. Now that means they were exactly 70, if I put that into the calculator, that's divided by 360, they were exactly 76 and a half days old on that day. Now if we go back the 540 days, you'll see I've got lots of notes and stuff in here, so but if I go back to 2022, when Israel turned 27,000 days old, this is the other number, this very interesting number, 27, which is 3 times 3 times 3, which can represent God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And we see 27, 3 by 3 by 3, or 3 cubed, and 75 all linked together. So 27,000 days is 75 prophetic years. So Israel turned 75 prophetically on the 15th of April 2022, which happened to be Passover. And interesting that number 22222 came up as well. So we see that, and that was in reference to the 56 days divided into 7 years, you get 0.022222. So, and that was also exactly 8,000 days from when the end of the first 6,000-year timeline ended. So Israel turned exactly 19,000 days old on the 20th of May 2000, then exactly 8,000 years later on Passover, Nisan 14, Israel turned 27,000 days old. Now, moving forward, back down to, if we go back to the 7th of October, you'll see that it was exactly 540 days, which is an interesting number again, because that's 2 times 270. So once again, we see the number 27 come up. It's also worth noting that it took Solomon 7.5 years to build the temple. 7.5 years is 2,700 days, 27 again. David ruled in Judah for 7.5 years, 2,700 days. Abraham was 75. So you see the 7.5, 7.5. It's 27,000 days old when he left Haran and his home and began his sojourn in Genesis. So these numbers are all linked and they get more interesting. So we had the 7th of October, exactly 280 days after this. So that's day 8540. We're going to go to 280 days later, which is 8820, that would be here, the 13th of July. Now, I am assuming that there would be, if this is all correct, that the rapture will occur sometime between today, the 22nd of May, and I've got a whole lot of dates that it could well happen between that date and the 13th of July. Now, going back to the 420 or the 42 again, I started looking at what's 420 days after day 8820. Well, that's day 9420. So this would be your first third of the tribulation, the first half of the tribulation period. And it ends up being the 6th of September 2025. Now, the 7th of September 2025 on the satanic calendar is called the marriage to the beast. Very interesting name for a day. And the fact that it's exactly 420 days after the potential start of the tribulation got me quite interested. Now, it's 6 days. You could say it's 6 or 7. So I thought that's okay, that works. You then go forward another 420 days, and you end up on day 9660. So we're through to that date. And that happens to be 31st of October 2026. Well, that's Halloween. Now, Halloween's also another satanic holy day, or unholy day, if you want to call it that. So we have, so far, the first third lands on a satanic day. Halloween is also regarded as a satanic day, and one of their highest days in terms of what goes on. Then you go forward the last 420 days, and you end up on day 10,080, which is the end here. You can see the end of the 7th 1260 day count, and Christmas is also can be considered a pagan holiday, based on the fact that it was related to worship of the sun god and Saturnalia. Jesus certainly wasn't born on the 25th of December, and from what I understand, it was incorporated. The birth of Christ was incorporated into the Roman pagan holidays that were kept at those times. So it is interesting that if you split that 1260 days into 3 420 day periods, they all land on a potentially pagan or satanic day. And then we had that point I made before. If you divide 10,080 into 15,120 days, you get 0.66666. You can see that here. And then lastly, we move forward. So that was the sort of the big revelation I discovered. And I thought that really felt like it gave weight to this idea that this day could well be the midpoint of the tribulation, where the abomination of desolation occurs, where the temple is desecrated. Now, the other thing about this date is it's also Kislev 25, 25th, which is on the ninth month of the Hebrew calendar, and is the first day of Hanukkah, the Feast of Hanukkah. So that happens to coincide in 2027. It's also the same day. So the 25th of Kislev in 168 BC was when Antiochus Epiphanes attacked Jerusalem and desecrated the temple by worshipping pigs on the altar. So it is interesting that happened way back then, and that the midpoint of the tribulation could be the same day on the Hebrew calendar, 2,000 plus years later. So that sort of covers off the 42. Okay, so the next date to consider is the end of this 9th 1260 day period, which is here, 7th of June 2031, which at this stage I'm assuming could be the second coming of Christ. And I wanted to sort of explain in more detail why I think that is. So another interesting thing, just going back to the working sheet here, I was playing around with some numbers the other day, and I worked out that if you take 42 years and you divide it by 40, you get exactly 378. I was looking at that number going, does that mean anything? And it clicked. There was some research I'd done on the timelines of the flood. And I'll go to that sheet and I'll show you what I had concluded. So what do we have here? Here we go. So according to Genesis, I have all these dates. You can ignore the 2023s, but the key date here is Genesis 7:4, where it talks about 7 days before the flood started, Noah entered the ark. And given that the flood started on the 17th month of the 17th day of the second month. Now I've put in the Hebrew names here, but I don't believe they existed at the time of Noah. And throughout Genesis, it's always described as the 27th day of the second month or the 17th day of the second month, that sort of thing. So and it is based on a 360-day calendar as it worked out using this timeline. So working back 7 days, would have been the 10th day of the second month. That would be day 1. And then you had 7 days, flood starts. And then you start working through the key events of the flood story. So it was rain for 40 days and 40 nights. That would have been day 47. Keep going, and then it was after 150 days. So it says here in Genesis 8:4 that the water was on the earth 150 days, and then the ark rested on Mount Ararat, which is the 17th day of the 7th month. So that would be what we know as Tishri 17. You'll note that I've got the calendar sort of reversed. Exodus, I think it's Exodus 12, talks about the calendar changing so that the Nisan became the first month of the calendar, assuming then it was previously the 7th month. So that's why I had the Nisan and the Tishri. Nisan's currently the first month, Tishri currently the 7th. It was possibly was reversed at the time of Noah. So that happens on day 150, 151. And then moving forward, we keep going to the water decreased until the first day of the 10th month. So that would have been day 225 or 232 if you were counting from the day that Noah entered the ark. Then moving down, so it was 40 days later that Noah opens the window and the raven and dove get sent out. That was day 265 or day 272, counting back from the 10th of the second month. Then it was 7 days later that Noah sends out the dove again, and then it was another 7 days and it didn't return. The dove didn't return. So that would be either day 279 or 286. Then we know on day 315 the water's dried up. And if I just double check Genesis 8:13, it was the first day of the first month. So here we have Nisan 1, day 315. Some interesting things around 315 as well, and 666 and how they link. And then finally, we head down to day 371, which was the 27th day of the second month in Genesis 8:14, and that's when Noah leaves the ark. But counting from the day that he entered the ark with the animals, that was day 378. So I thought that was very interesting that it's exactly 378 days from the 10th day of the second month through to the 27th day of the second month, a year later. And this would be based on a 360-day calendar, not the Hebrew calendar, which has 29 days and 30 days mixed in. So this is based on 30 days in every month. So there you go. It comes to 15,120 days or 42 years. So that was interesting, and I'm doing some more work on that. Just quickly on the 666 thing. There's a number of combinations of numbers that add up to 666. It's 351 plus 1. Let me get my maths right here. Plus 315. Oops, 315. We also have 153 plus 513. And there is 315 plus 351. So those all add up. Oh, sorry, that one's wrong. I've missed one. It's 531. 531 plus 135. So interestingly enough, there's 3 numbers mentioned in the New Testament that are what you can call a triangular number. So a triangular number is when you go 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, and whatever the sum of that number is the triangular number. So for example, if you added up 1 through to 36, so 1 to 36, the sum of that is 666. The sum of 1 to 17 is 153. I'll show you this. I've actually got a diagram here. Might help. Well, here's triangular numbers for a start. So if we go back, I've been doing a bit of work on triangular numbers. So if you can see here that the 17th triangular number is 153. The 36th triangular number is 666. And actually the other number that's mentioned in Acts, it's the story of Paul who gets shipwrecked, and there's 276 people on board. That's the 23rd triangular number. So there's 3 numbers in the New Testament that I've found so far that are all triangular numbers. Now, of course, a triangle is 3-sided, so that could be a relation representative of God's involvement. 3 being a number that God uses all the time. I think it's the most used number in the Bible, to be honest. So anyway, that's just a quick side story to do with 666 and 153. But yeah, in terms of the flood timeline, the fact that 40, the number of probation and trial, goes into, if you times that by 378, you get exactly 42 years. I thought was quite interesting, and there's probably more work to be done on that. All right, back to the timeline. So we've got the 7th of June 2031, and I've maintained that, if you go back to my last video, that if you look at the Daniel 9 prophecy in the 483 years, that you can conclude that Jesus Christ was crucified on the 25th of April, 31 AD. So I'll go to that worksheet and I will work through the dates to show why the 7th of June looks so interesting. Okay, so what we have here is April the 25th, Wednesday, April the 25th. It was Nisan 14, Passover, and Christ dies before twilight on the Passover, buried before sunset that evening or at sunset that evening. And that would be, so that's the first, so Wednesday night is the first night in the tomb. Thursday would be the first day and the second night. Friday would be the second day and the third night, and Saturday day, the Sabbath, would have been the third day. So to conclude, it means that Christ would have been resurrected at around sunset or on sunset on the Sabbath on Saturday. Now we know that he was seen the next day on Sunday, the first day of the week, and that's when Peter and John went running to the tomb and he saw Mary, and that evening he was with the disciples. So that was Sunday, April 29th, which was Nisan 18. And then it says that in John 20:26, he was away for 8 days, and it was after 8 days that he returned. So I've counted that out. So here's day 1 after his resurrection, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 8. This was after 8 days. Now, at the same time, you've got unleavened bread going on. So the Thursday was the first day of unleavened bread, second day of unleavened bread, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And then you've got various theories around when the Feast of First Fruits was. And it's maintained that the Feast of First Fruits, Christ fulfilled as offering himself as the first fruit to God the Father. Now, most people believe, or a lot of people believe, that happened on this Sunday here, which was Nisan 18. Now, I have a slightly different theory, which links in to Leviticus 12, and I'll cover that off. But before I do that, if we start counting from the first day from when he was resurrected, the 40th day, so we know from Acts chapter 1 that he was with the disciples 40 days. I maintain that he was, and that he ascended on, once again, the 27th of the second month. Now that is also the same day on the flood where the flood ended and Noah got out of the ark. Not a coincidence. It happened to be on the 27th day of the second month. And that was June the 7th. So link that back to the end of the 9th period on the 42 year. Let's jump back to that. So 7th of June 2031 is the end of the 9th period. Remember, I divided 11,340 days and you got the 0.75. Interesting that 75 comes up again, which is also related to 3 times 3 times 3, or 27. Well, that was the 7th of June. So I find it very interesting that if Christ did die in 31 AD, as I believe he did, then his potential second coming would be exactly 2,000, and in this case Gregorian years. It's actually not, it'd be the solar calendar, so 365.25 days in a solar year. But it would be exactly 2,000 years from the day he ascended in 31 AD to the day he returns in his second coming in 2031. And it happens to be exactly 33 days from day 8 of his disappearance. So if we go to Leviticus 12, there is a discussion around, let's actually just bring it up. Where are we here? So Leviticus 12. Okay, this was about the laws of motherhood. And I think there's a potential link here. So it talks here about speaking to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman have conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. According to the days of separation for her infirmity shall she be unclean. Well, I found it interesting that Jesus was away for 7 days and then the 8th day. Bear with me. And in the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And I always wondered, why was Jesus away 8 days? Well, it is interesting that the Feast of Tabernacles lasts for 7 days, and then the 8th day is called the last great day, and that is representing the great white throne judgment, which is described in Revelation. I think that's Revelation 20 verses 11. Yeah. So again, that's the 8th day. Circumcision is on the 8th day. Jesus is away for 8 days. And then it continues, and then she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days, and she shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. So you've got this 40-day period, and then it goes on about female children, and they were 14 days and 66, making up 80. But male child was 70. Then the 8th day was circumcision, which was part of the covenant that was with Abraham, that God made with Abraham, and also children were there after that were circumcised on the 8th day. And then, of course, there's the final 33, making up 40. Well, we know Jesus was away for 40. He ascended after 40 days. Could it be that this 7 days is somehow symbolic of those 7 days of purification, the 8th day representing the circumcision in some way, and then you've got the final 33 days where on the 40th day he ascends to the sanctuary to heaven. I think there's a strong link there. I could be off, but it fits really nicely. Now, what that means is I believe that the Feast of First Fruits was actually on day 8. And this is why the 8th day keeps appearing throughout Scripture. Or the number 8, certainly. And anyway, that's my theory at this point, that day 8 was actually when Jesus presented himself as the first fruits after those 7 days. Could it be one of the reasons that when Mary tried to hug him, he'd said to her, "You can't touch me at this point"? So anyway, so the timeline would be Jesus is away 7 days, going back to Leviticus 12, the 8th day, the circumcision day, he goes to heaven. Then he appears back after 40 days. Then from there it's 33, or from the first fruits, it's 33 days to the ascension on the 7th. Now, because I believe first fruits is on day 8, this means looking at Leviticus 23 is a little bit different. So a lot of people believe that you count. It says here, he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted on your behalf on the day after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. So that's Leviticus 23:11. A lot of people think the Sabbath is either this Sabbath here, so that could possibly be first fruits. Some people think it's after the high Sabbath, the first day of unleavened bread, which was a special holiday, high Sabbath on that day. Some people, after that day. So there's different theories out there. Most, I think the generally Pentecost at the moment, it was called Shavuot back then, were based on the Sabbath during unleavened bread. I think it's the Sabbath after unleavened bread has completed. That fits with day 8. So this was the Sabbath here. This is the Sunday from when you started counting, which would be first fruits. So it says here, on the day after the Sabbath is day 7, day 8 would be first fruits, the priest shall wave it, and then you start doing your count of 7 Sabbaths. So that would mean the count would be here, that would be day 50, which would be June the 24th in 31 AD, which happens to be Sivan 15. Now that's the 15th day of the 3rd month, which again fits beautifully with the idea that, well, that was a full moon. 15th day of the 3rd month. Well, the 15th day of the 1st month, which is Nisan, is the first day of unleavened bread. That's a full moon. It's the 15th day. So 15th day of the 1st month, full moon, unleavened bread. 15th day of the 7th month, which is Tishri, is the first day of unleavened bread. Wouldn't it make sense that Shavuot or Pentecost is the 15th day of the 3rd month? Again, these numbers are so used, God's favorite numbers are 3 and 7. 12 is the other one. 1, obviously. So it makes a lot of sense. But just going back to this ascension date. So that happens to link in with, let's go back to the other timeline here. Right, so if I go through now to 2031, on the 7th of June, this would be the other 1260-day period, happens to be the 7th of June. Now, the other little thing I did is I thought, well, it feels to me that the prophetic calendar and the Gregorian calendar have somehow linked here. So if I go back exactly 7 years in Gregorian in the current calendar, that would be the 7th of June 2024. So you go back to that day, and one of my theories is that the rapture could occur on the same day, exactly 1993 years after Christ ascended, and then exactly 7 years later would be the second coming. But the other thing I discovered is I was looking at the actual number of days from a sort of prophetic calendar point of view, and from the 8th of June through to the 7th of June was 2,555 days, which I have here. Now that, if you divide that by 7, that's exactly 365 weeks, which sort of makes sense. But interestingly enough, Enoch was raptured when he turned 365. So I thought that was quite interesting. But then also the number itself, 25555. If you take 16 to the power of 2 plus 17 to the power of 2, all the way through to 22 to the power of 2. So this is a run of numbers from 16 to 22, all to the power of 2. You add them all together, you get 2,555. And of late, I'm seeing a lot of interesting patterns around cubed numbers, squared numbers, and rows of numbers adding up to some of these dates. So that sort of concludes what I was thinking in terms of potential. There are other rapture dates that things could occur. It is interesting that it's exactly 36 days from the 7th of June, 36 being 6 times 6, to the, the 13th of July. The fact it's 280 days from the 7th of October. There's also second Passover to consider. That second Passover is here on the 23rd of May. That's tomorrow. And there is some other days in here which certainly could link to a potential rapture date. But I might try and cover those off in another video. So I hope that was of some interest. I was certainly very interested with the, let me get back to my timeline here. I was certainly fascinated with the breakdown of the 1,260 days into 3 periods of 420 days, with that number 42 coming up again, and the fact that those 3 dates all link to either days on the satanic calendar or pagan festivals, or linked to pagan festivals. So I just want to finish off by saying that, if these timelines are correct, then there's not a lot of time left. The world is pretty crazy. The only way out of this mess is through Jesus Christ. We need to place our faith and hope and trust in him. In Revelation, what does Revelation 3:10 say? Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. I feel that time is approaching quickly. Even if this timeline is not entirely accurate to the day, I still believe that we're at the end of that 6,000 year period. The tribulation is close. The rapture of the church is close. And 7 years after that, Jesus Christ will return and sort this mess out. So I hope this has been of interest. I hope it helps people. And if something else comes up in the next few days, then I will try and post another video. Take care.